Hail, and welcome back to Elder Futhark Rune Divination 101. Previously, we discussed the rune of Perfro, and today we will be discussing the rune of Algiz, the rune of divine protection, the rune of divine quests, the rune of divine opportunities. There are many applications one can give to Algiz, so first I would like to mention a couple things. Maybe, as you can tell, I am a little tired right now. Before I wrote the script to this video, I was thinking that I would save this little story for Sowilo, it being the rune of energy, of victory, of the sun, of brightness and warmth in that sense. But I have decided to very briefly interject some things here because I feel it is in some ways actually more suited perhaps to the nature of Algiz as a whole. So I a couple days actually ended a contract that was with me that I made in the 1500s in a past incarnation, if you can believe it. This contract was apparently very taxing on me because we had to retrieve it, we had to read it in astral, we had to solve it and return the things that I had received for this contract to its appropriate owner. In turn, what I received, I had to pay pretty massive amounts of energy, which explains why I have always been feeling rather tired, why I had certain mental things that were, wrong with me, I would say. Depression, anxiety, stuff like that. Now, I am finally free from this, and, Algiz, it being the rune of a divine quest, of a divine protection, of opportunity, I feel that these things that have happened to me, just like with the experiences that I shared with you guys in the past two videos, I really do feel that when you work through the Futhark, that the runes have a tendency of making energy flow in such a way around you while you are studying them, while you are working with them as in depth as I am, that they teach you certain lessons at the appropriate time almost. It's very exciting for me to finally be free from this contract because well, I won't go into too much detail, partially out of respect for who I made the contract with, because they did follow through with everything that they that I bargained with them for, shall we say. It was a darker being, for lack of a better word, and well, I must admit that initially I was a little miffed to find out that these contracts were running all the way up to this current incarnation that I currently am. I mean, 500 and something years is a very long time to be paying for something that I didn't even know I had until several, weeks ago, I believe it was, to a month or two ago. And, I've been slowly working on this contract behind the scenes to solve it, to gather the appropriate amount of energy to, as a final donation to the person that I made this contract with. And the contract is now officially resolved. I am officially free, and this to me also indicates that I am one step closer to fulfilling my initiation, as it is sometimes called, or shamanic initiation, if you prefer that term. So yeah, there's a couple more steps that I need to go through as far as I'm aware, with other contracts that are still active that I also incurred or acquired, or whatever you want to call it, in past lives. And I guess what I'm saying is that if you are called to magic, there may be a thing like this that you have been dealing with without you even knowing it, a spirit contract. And I mean, the part of the reason I am not miffed, as I said earlier, on this contract, or because of this contract, I should say, is because I actually got very, very much out of it, more than I expected. And, well, I mean, back in the 1500s, certain things about the body, about the brain that were discussed in that contract that I would be paying them, this lord, or god, or deity, or whatever you prefer, basically, you know, my incarnation in the 1500s would likely not have known about this, and also would probably not have known just how much energy, you know, I'd be giving up. And this incarnation also did not have the wit to discuss an end to the contract, you know, when he would die, or you know, say after this many years or whatever, you know, the contract would automatically end, because that would be something that I would personally do. But then again, I know a little more about spirit contracts than my incarnation back then likely did, because he was a devout Christian, from my understanding. And yeah, that is another thing that I have had to deal with, the Christian aspect of things, of past life contracts, which is something I'm actually currently still working on, partially, although most of it has been remedied. And, you know, I'm a pagan in this life. I will be honest with you, do not like Christianity at all. I do not like the Abrahamic traditions. I find them, to be perfectly fair with you, very misogynistic, very condescending, you know, stuff like that. So that is something I am currently working to rid myself of. And yeah, so this too was something that contributed to my inspiration for this particular video, because it is a divine opportunity, in my opinion, that I get to be able to access these things, that I get to cure myself of things that have been bothering and plaguing me all my life. And well, I can't wait until, you know, I have fully recovered from this removal, because there were, if you can believe it, 45,000 spirits attached to me that were given to me as as this particular deity's part of the bargain. So I was literally born in this life with 45,000 very dark spirits attached to me, who were literally just sitting in some pocket plane awaiting my command, and I didn't even know I had them. But I was reading through the contract, and I was like, you know, this is just not worth it. And I mean, I am someone who does not follow the right hand or the left hand path. I walk the proverbial middle way. So I don't really particularly find myself shying all that much away from either or. But, you know, I was just like, I already have my own very, you know, tested group of spirits, shall we say. And I don't know what to do with this. I don't find the amount of energy I'm paying for it to be worth it. You know, stuff like that. But what I also did find out, because this particular deity also teaches languages, and I suppose that you could think that the Elder Futhark is a language, and perhaps some of you that I have, now that I have said that, will know who I'm talking about. You know, a place that's familiar with me, which is now gone, and they apparently were assisting me in learning the Futhark, the Elder Futhark in particular, which is pretty interesting. So, you know, a lot of the knowledge and insight that I had into it apparently came from that contract, which is not to say, obviously, that I now will no longer be able to put out, you know, rune videos that are as in-depth as I was before, because I have meditated on the runes. I have studied them for years now. I have, you know, worked with them in past lives, even before I made this contract. Way before I made this contract, actually. I know that much from, past life regressions and meditations and stuff like that. So no worries, my quality of my videos is not going to be lowered by the release of this familiar, which I sent back to its master, basically. So a lot of interesting stuff happened, and I do not think it is a coincidence that Algiz, for what it represents, is the rune that I am going to be discussing now. And considering that Sowilo, the rune of victory, the rune of energy and revelation, as a finishing touch to the second 8 will, enlighten me on just how much I have truly gained from, being able to support this many spirits, because, wow, I have quite a significant amount of spirits working with me already, and that was before I even knew that I had these 45,000 attached to me. So, I would recommend those of you who are serious about the metaphysical, about the occult, about working with magic, to check with your deities, because Odin was actually the one who pointed me to these contracts, that they were actually active, and he said, as part of your initiation into the Futhark, as part of your initiation into this particular shamanic path that you are following, I want you to take a look at these. Here you go. He just basically practically dropped it in my lap and was like, here, find someone to help you read this without bias. And I had a friend who was fortunately able to do that, who was very gifted with seeing and stuff like that. So because obviously I could potentially try to read it myself, but there is so much bias involved when you do it yourself, especially because it's from a past life and you don't exactly know what you discussed or bargained with these beings with. So he basically helped me out so incredibly much, and I'm so grateful to Odin for that. And normally, again, I'm not really in the habit of sharing it, but then I'm sitting here wondering to myself, what's the harm? If it can help to educate some of you, to maybe inspire some of you to take a look at some things that could potentially be of very strong benefit to perhaps some of you, I would really recommend that you maybe look in that direction to see if perhaps you have some hidden spirit contracts that you made in past lives that may have not been terminated properly, or that you may not have negotiated properly back then, because that's always the catch. For those of us who work in the spirit world a lot with beings like these, we know that spirits and the spirit world in general seems to function very strongly on contracts. Because these beings, obviously, they have to stick to their word, because nobody's going to ask them for help, nobody's going to ask them for assistance, or for nice things, or less nice things if you are so inclined. They have to stick to their word, because otherwise nobody's going to trust them anymore. So they have to follow the contract to the letter, and so do we, whether we are aware of this in this life or not. And that is something that I have found out the hard way. But then again, that's part of being on the shamanic path. You learn to help others by suffering through it yourself, as it were. So that's something I would like to advise you, my viewers, to look into. Anyway, with that said, I would like to start this whole video on Algiz. So, some basic facts on Algiz is that it is, as mentioned, the rune of divine protection, of opportunity, of a divine quest. And I would also say that it is a rune that allows the connection to other worlds. It is the 15th rune in the Elder Futhark, making it the 7th rune of the second 8, and therefore the second to last of the second 8. The modern day letter equivalent is the letter Z. The associated astrological sign is Cancer. The associated element is air, and this to me actually makes a lot of sense. It is a rune that carries a very high vibration. And a note on vibrations, by the way, I am not someone who thinks that raising one's vibration is necessarily better than having a low vibration. I mean, for example, that friend that I mentioned who was very gifted in seeing, she has a very low vibration. I personally have been told that I have a rather high vibration. And I do not believe at all that, high or low vibrations are necessarily good or evil or whatever. I believe that as someone who walks the middle way, both these things have a place in the universe and in life itself. So, that balance needs to exist, and I do not think that someone with a low vibration is evil. I do not think they have a higher, chance of committing crimes or doing bad things. And I keep making the quote-unquote mark with my fingers for a reason. I just don't see things that way. I think it is, however, a indicator of what realms you are more connected to, I suppose. And this friend of mine, she is a druidess. She works a lot with nature, with the animals. She works a lot with earth stuff, with elements like that, and I think that is wonderful. I personally don't really focus all that much on those kinds of things. So high vibration is not necessarily good. Low vibration is not necessarily bad. I mean, I have met people who have high vibrations who are complete and utter assholes, and I've met people who have very low vibrations, like my friend, who are just absolutely wonderful. And so that is another thing that I would like to define here concretely before we continue with this rune video. Anyway, so element of air, which I feel makes sense, high vibration. It reaches up to the skies. It stands like like a priest would. It stands like a person with their legs together, is raising their arms to greet the sky, to chant or shout to the gods. That is something that the rune, the shape of Algiz, invokes in my mind. It is a priest or a shaman who is petitioning the gods, who is shouting praises and thanks, and who is delving into the astral and spiritual planes to gather knowledge, to let the spirit flow inside of it, inside of themselves, to receive knowledge, to channel, to stuff like that. So it also the element of air to me also always feels like easy flowing, like freedom. It fills your lungs. It invigorates. I mean, breath is life. Chi. It is to seek the knowledge and power of the gods. Provides that breath of fresh air, after the harsh lessons of the second aid that at times have occurred. And I'm not saying that the second aid is entirely harsh, because every rune has a negative and a positive side, and a side that can be used positively and or negatively. So the associated gods are Heimdall, due to his function and role as watcher and guardian. I also very strongly believe that, personally, that Thor, as defender of Asgard and Midgard against the chaotic Jotun forces, that is a very appropriate connection there as well. I personally love working with Thor. I love lightning. I love his personality. I think in some ways I'm actually a lot like Thor, in that I am, overall pretty easygoing, but piss me off, and you know what I'm saying. I find it a very strong connection there, because of his role as defender of humanity, of Asgard, of the gods themselves, against chaos that ever seeks to encroach upon our world, upon their world. And So I also believe actually that Algiz, because it is a rune of divine protection, it is a representation of the divine as a whole. It includes the world of the gods, Asgard, Vanaheim, Alfheim, the worlds of the Azagods, which is Asgard, where Odin and others like him reside, the world of the Vanir, where Frey and Freya come from, Vanaheim, the home of the Light Elves, or Alfheim, which is the world over which Frey rules. So I feel that the three branches that Algiz shows actually directly, in my mind, always connect to those three worlds specifically. And of course, when you flip Algiz over, which is something that we will get to later, it connects to several other worlds in the Norse cosmology. So Algiz has a reverse and a converse meaning. And yeah, so the general definition of Algiz, sometimes also called Elhaz, which is not a name I personally use, but some people apparently know this rune by that name. It is the rune of divine protection. It is the rune of quests and missions to, reach for one's higher and highest potential. It is the rune of, protection against all comers, against adversity, against any and all adversity. It is the rune that leads into Sowilo, the rune of the sun, of victory, of energy, of revelation. And I feel very strongly in that sense that Algiz is a representation of our ascent into, if you think this is arrogant, okay, so be it, but I do feel that it is a initiatory rune into ascension, into reaching for our own divinity. Because I very strongly personally believe that we all come from the one, the creator, which, by the way, is not to say that I believe that this being is a Yahweh kind of figure, not at all. I think that the divine creator, the supreme creator, whatever you want to call it, it is a point of origin which we do not fully understand, and I'm not sure if we ever fully can, or all that is sometimes what I refer to it as. So I believe that every person is deep down a part of that deity, of that Godhead, of that divine point of origin. So our souls are basically just fragments and splinters to me of that being. And I do not believe that it is bad or quote unquote evil to seek your own divinity, to seek your own godhood, to seek your own ascent. I think that Odin is a very strong representative of someone who quests for wisdom, for knowledge, to that end, to achieve his highest potential, to achieve his greatest divinity, and he is, for a reason, the deity that I work with most. He's the god of shamans. He's the god of wisdom. Ansus is his personal rune, as we have discussed way back when. So I feel that that is a very appropriate thing to attribute to Algiz. It is a rune of self-development. It is a rune that functions as a bulwark against those that would hinder our quest for empowerment in a world where everything around us basically attempts to force us to remain in shackles, whether that is from disempowering religions, whether that is from societal pressures or from political strife. All those elements which are used to keep people contained, to keep people in chaos, to keep people divided, stuff like that. Algiz, it raises its branches and head up to the sky. It shouts in victory and triumph as old frailties and weaknesses, as well as useless old convictions and worries that were once so relevant to us, they are cast off, they are broken, they are removed, and we can finally, after the lessons of Hagalas, the disruption rune, after the lesson of Naudis, who restrained us and put us in shackles and showed us what it's like to be a prisoner, perhaps in our own minds, perhaps in our own frail disease-ridden bodies, or you know, stuck in a religion that you know is not true, or that you know is not right, or that teaches things like hate, you know, and then you have worked through the Futhark to finally realize that the universe is much more open. It is much more of a blank canvas than what organized religion has told you, and you can, you know, finally just start to become free. And that lesson, in my mind, started with Yira, the temporary reward that we reaped, the harvest that we had. You know, we finally figured out that fate and destiny are not set things, that we are not a victim of fate or predetermination. We actually do make our own decisions, even as the world around us is influencing us. And Algiz, after the, you know, the defense and the patience that Isa and Aiwaz, you know, while at the same time planning and remaining active, respectively, you know, that these runes have taught us to sometimes just bide our time, to sometimes just wait for the right opportunity. Algiz is now just, you know, showing us that we can finally break free. It encourages us to reach for the sky, to just, you know, empower ourselves, basically. Algiz, it protects, in that it represents the Sedge branch, like the Anglo-Saxon rune poem that is quoted at the beginning of this video. You know, that, like it says, it rises up from these nourishing waters that have sustained and fed us, our convictions, our strengths, our willingness to engage against forces that sought to keep us down, that sought to inhibit our growth, our ascension, our development, our empowerment, our self-empowerment, and our self-reliance. It has taught us everything necessary to make it as far into the Futhark as we have so far. It symbolizes that we are now ready to leave behind the harsher lessons that we have learned, so that we may truly ascend out of the second eight, through Sawilo, and then into the third. Because I feel that Sawilo, it gives us the energy, the understanding, the revelation, the victory that we need over the second eight to fully start working on the third eight, which is a rune very much to me associated with the spiritual, with self-development, with introspection, with basically tempering ourselves, with you know, making sure that we smelt ourselves, we forge ourselves into the furnace of existence, to become a better version of who we were before we started the Futhark. So Algiz is therefore also an encouragement that we have all the things that we need, all the tools that we need now to start manifesting things into our reality, to you know, cause things to be in our in our personal lives, whether that be physically or mentally or spiritually, and to empower ourselves in those areas. And it is also assuring us that as the Sach branch, it will protect us against those who would come against us, who would try to grab us, to try to restrain us. It will cut those that try to grab it, as the rune poem verse that I've quoted in the beginning of this video also clearly demonstrates. Because it says, you know, it grows in the water and it makes a ghastly wound, covering with blood every warrior who touches it. So that verse, to me, I mean, the usage of the word warrior, sometimes it is translated as man. I personally find the word warrior a nice usage here. It is fitting to me because of this particular interpretation that I am offering you here, because it talks about opposition. I mean, if you think of yourself as a spiritual warrior who is working through the Futhark, working through these spiritual problems, working through the mental and physical problems, perhaps, you will have opposition. I mean, I have had opposition from other people, whether that be from family, whether that be from so-called friends, whether that be from religious leaders that I was once a part of, who I finally cut ties with, whether that be from fellow magicians even. Yes, that has happened. Um, Stuff like that, and I've overcome all those oppositions, and Algiz is therefore to me a very, very, very dear rune because it represents to me everything that, you know, is what makes a, well, quote unquote, spiritual warrior what he is or she is. So I feel that that is a very powerful reason why I have said that Algiz is my favorite rune in the Elder Futhark. Algiz urges us to empower ourselves, to claim our divine birthright, like Odin did, who hung himself from the world tree, recovered the knowledge of the runes from the abyss by his sacrifice after stabbing himself with Gungnir. So even he, highest of the Norse Germanic pantheon, had to sacrifice, and as he put it, he sacrificed of himself to himself, for he knew no higher. And I think, in a way, because I'm not someone who takes the myths literally. I mean, they were written by Christians in Iceland when Iceland was already Christianized. So I always take the myths from the Eddas with a very, very strong grain of salt. And I prefer to just approach the gods directly and ask them, hey, how does this work, and how does that work, and how do you view this? And 9 times out of 10 you'll just get an answer, and the other 1/10 of the time you'll get a figure it out yourself by meditating on it or by going through something, and then you'll understand what that and that means. So in that sense, I feel that a lot of pagan deities who are, in my opinion, much more approachable than the Abrahamic deities, because I'm not quite sure if Allah and Yahweh are one and the same, but I will leave that up to the interpretation of every single one of you. But I find them to be much more approachable. I mean, they are not distant beings. They are usually happy to work with people who have the intelligence to understand that the gods are not there to be groveled before. It is my feeling a lot of the time when I work with them that they do not want you to kneel, they don't want you to pray to them, they want you to stand before them proud, they want you to stand before them, not kneel before them, and they want you to see them as family, as friends who are mentors, and who have gone through the same things in different aspects, in different ways, which they can teach you, and this can in turn help with your own ascent, with your own with your own empowerment. And they are more than willing to teach those beings who are smart enough to actually approach them and not see them as distant. Because I mean, I once had someone tell me, yeah, the gods don't get involved in mortal affairs, and this may be true unless you ask them for it. But this person also told me once that they do not interact with people, and if you get their attention, it's usually not a good thing, and I have just not found this to be true. So it is, I feel very much dependent on the person, what kind of interaction they have with you. That may be partially because, well, everybody is different, obviously, and I feel that everybody needs different things at different times. So I really, don't be afraid to approach deities. Don't be afraid to communicate with them. And I think that this is also a very valuable lesson that Algiz gives us. It has certainly given that to me. Because some of the things, like that contract, for example, I would not have been able to truly find out if Odin had not pointed my attention towards it. I mean, I suspected that there was something going on. I actually had another shaman tell me like 2 years ago out of nowhere, and I didn't even really know this person. They contacted me via Facebook, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, this and that must be let go of because this and that happened in that life, and you were this medieval person, and you wanted, you wanted a title, and you approached, stuff, and pride must be let go of, and blah blah blah." And I didn't really know what they were talking about. I mean, it obviously drew my attention to that there was something of a contract going on, or some kind of spiritual tie, some kind of spiritual thing that I needed to do. But because there is just so much bias when you are dealing with something from like 500 years ago that a past incarnation of you did, and you start comparing that to all the problems you have in your life, and it just becomes this convoluted garble of, so I would advise you that if you start looking into that kind of thing, in spirit contracts and bargaining with beings, that you A, think very well on your terms, that you B, set an end date, preferably at the moment of your death or even before of your choosing. In other words, set a term that says this contract either ends when this particular incarnation's physical body dies, or I approach you for the end of this contract. Stuff like that. So that is another, darker thing that Algiz has taught me, that one must also be careful when communicating with the divine, with gods, with lords, no matter what side they are on. If you, approach Archangel Michael, or if you approach Lucifer, or if you approach, I don't know, Agaris or Odin, or whatever. It doesn't really matter in that sense. I do feel that you have to be careful in how you formulate things, because again, a spirit contract is a spirit contract, and they need to adhere to it just like you do. And if there is something that you have overlooked there, I would start considering yourself as a bit of a spiritual lawyer, which is again something that I personally have been going through as part of my initiation, but because that's a skill that you need to have on the path that I'm on. So it is something that you have to be careful of, yes, and it is always better, that is another lesson that I have also learned, to offer a sacrifice of yourself. I have repeatedly, for example, mentioned that before I could, start reading for money, like in terms of divination specifically, because that's a popular method, an easy method to make money with, for example, that I would make these rune videos. So and sometimes the gods will approach you and say, okay, you have done this and that, even though you have not entirely finished this. I'll cut you some slack, and I'll sweeten the deal a little bit. I don't want anything in return. This is a reward for your efforts with this and that so far. I do not find them to be at all, unfair or unjust. It is, however, something that you, as the practitioner, as the sorcerer, sorceress, or witch, or whatever you call yourself, that you need to be very careful of when you interact with deities, and that is a lesson that is technically not really part of Algiz itself as is, but I do feel that it is an important thing that it has taught me, and so I'm interjecting that here, considering my own experiences with this. So Algiz, lastly, is also a rune of fear. That is perhaps may initially seem a little counterintuitive, but I feel it is actually very much tying into the interacting with the divine, interacting with deities and stuff like that, because there is so much fear these days about interacting with forces that are greater than you in power, greater than you in influence, and especially if you're wanting to ascend, if you want to tap into your own divinity, into your own godhood. There are forces on this planet who are very active that just want to keep you under their thumb, and I shall not name any names, but I'm sure several deities will come to mind that rely on fear, that work on fear, and that do not like seeing people ascend, that do not like seeing people recognize their own influence, because in so doing they are going to be losing followers and worshippers. So, as you are progressing from Algiz to Sowilo, you will find that if you work on Algiz, that there is a perhaps innate fear. Personally, I did have this in the sense that I found it rather, I sat there for weeks on end, like, oh, what's this contract gonna say? What am I gonna have to do? Am I gonna have to do something I really don't like? And yeah, there was something I had to do that I really didn't like, but in hindsight, it was totally worth it, And it is, in hindsight, despite the fact that I've literally had a bit of a shitty existence the past 500 years as a result of this contract on various levels, I can only surmise that what is going to come after is going to be pretty damn fantastic. So, I mean, that is something that you have to be willing to face. You have to be able to work through the fear, perhaps the fear of the unknown, like I had. The fear of how to put this, the fear of perhaps sometimes needing to work with beings that you perhaps would rather not. Or perhaps there is some misunderstanding to who this being truly is, how they operate, and stuff like that, because that latter was kind of the case in my case, actually, because, I mean, you'll read descriptions on who they are, and they'll be like, okay, and yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they really didn't do anything wrong. I just messed up in negotiating the contract. That was the fault of my previous incarnation, maybe by extent, therefore me, but lesson learned, and, so... stuff like that. There are things in magic that you have to be willing to power through. As I have, I hesitate to use the word preached here so many times. Magic isn't for the weak. It's not for cowards. The shamanic path is also not for cowards. It is, something that you should not be doing if you believe that everything is love and light and happiness and stuff, because you're just gonna get nowhere. You're sooner or later going to be dealing with forces that have their own interests at heart, and let's be honest here, everybody has their own interests at heart that sometime, somewhere, somehow, some way. So, and that's natural. I don't feel that is in any way, shape, or form selfish. I mean, it is good to take care of yourself, and in my case, I do that so that I can, feel good about myself, feel happy about myself, feel confident with myself. I also do it to help other people who are in need of help, that are around me and that I feel are suffering as a result of certain spiritual things, because, that is the kind of thing I personally deal with. And, it is something that you have to find a balance in, I feel. And this is why I say I follow the middle way. I don't follow the right hand or the left hand path, because you got two hands. Why would you only use one of them, And yes, I know that is a very, very strong generalization. I know that is not entirely how it works, but it's. I like to think it is a fun thing to think about in that way, in that sense. And, if you follow the right-hand path or you follow the left-hand path, I'm not judging you. It's up to you what you feel most comfortable with, what you feel helps you. And personally, I find it to be more satisfying to take things from both ends. I mean, if somebody attacks me, and I will deal with them. It's that simple. And if somebody, is in need of healing, if they are, dealing with spiritual issues, I will help them. it's, if I feel that they are, willing to actually work for their own spiritual issues to be accomplished, because that is another thing where Algiz ties in its fear aspect. Because I think for a lot of people that dealing with their mental issues, their spiritual issues, they are in this state of fear, and I feel that both as a person on the shamanic path as well as a student of psychology, that a lot of people they just do not really want to introspect. Like, they want to have an instant fix, an instant cure for their issues, and unfortunately that is just not how that works. And so that is a very, very touchy discussion. I'm not going to go into that any further, because there is a gray area between secular science and how we see things from a shamanic perspective, where we believe that a lot of issues stem from spiritual problems. So, that is a discussion I'm not going to be going into, out of respect for all of your personal opinions and experiences involved. But for one who is on the metaphysical path, for one who is developing themselves, fear is a very strong factor. Once you come to that point of saying, am I a sack of bones, or am I a god in the flesh? And I feel that line in the middle here, for those of you who are working towards ascending yourself, towards achieving your godhood, your divinity, for tapping into it. I should not say reaching it. It is more tapping into it from where I'm standing. And that does not mean, obviously, that you'll never get sick or stuff like that. I mean, the physical body is the physical body, but to be able to freely want to access that power, free from constraints of, oh, am I being arrogant if I think of it this way? Because that's something I had to deal with. I mean, I come from a Christian background. I come from a background where I'm told that only Yahweh and through his son Jesus is Savior, and only he can forgive your sins, and blah blah blah, and you are just a useless piece of ash and a piece of clay and a piece of dust that will return to the earth, and everything is subject to Yahweh's dictation and rule. And that's just not the way I see things, fortunately, anymore. I am a much more confident, much more happy person now that I have done away with these things. I mean, that is obviously traditional Christianity. I am aware that there are people nowadays who see it a little differently, and again, out of respect for those people, that is obviously your right. I have no problem with your beliefs or convictions if you choose to see it that way, but I do have a problem with the subjugational aspects of Christianity, and I do feel that if you want to grow beyond a certain point in the Futhark, or even in magic in general, you have to you have to be able to overcome those imprinted, ingrained, programmed fears of judgment, and whether those fears of judgment come from your deity, or whether that comes from people around you, because let's face it, if you're a magician, if you're a sorcerer, if you're a witch, if you're a shaman, whatever, people are going to judge you in modern days. It is what it is. So in that sense, Algiz is also another thing where we have to freely be able to raise our hands to the sky, freely raise our awareness, freely let go of that guilt, of that fear, of judgment, of condemnation, of all these things. Because if you cannot shed those things, you will be stuck on Algiz. There will be no victory. There will be no energy that you're going to receive. There will be no revelation beyond a certain point. You have to be able to step past that. You have to be able to cut off old restraints, to cut off these old things. You have to be willing to face the harsher lessons of the Futhark. You have to be willing to fully embrace with gusto the wonderful things that the Futhark teaches you. You have to not feel guilty, as was so often the case when I, when I did the the Futhark, the first rune row. It's about the physical aspect a lot. It's about happiness, about wealth, about to a certain degree sexual energy in Urus, for example. Fehu for wealth, Wunyo happiness, gifts, Gabo, stuff like that, and I just feel that you would be better off in casting off those old restraints in that sense. So that is another lesson that Algiz very strongly teaches. And I know I'm supposed to be talking about the divination part of it, but I do feel that these lessons in understanding the next rune row that we are going to be getting to, in understanding Sowilo as well, in understanding pretty much everything that we have discussed before in the Futhark, that in order to fully integrate it, that these are important lessons. And it just so happens that I get put through stuff on your behalf, so that you can hopefully draw some lessons from it as well, and on my own behalf, obviously. So I hope that this may stir some people, invite some people to let go of their previous ideas. It's something that I find so very powerful about Algiz, and I am not at all trying to discredit every other rune in the Futhark. Of course, it just so happens that I personally have a very strong connection to this rune, and one of the most valuable lessons in my life so far has actually come to me in the past several weeks. And so therefore this video is going to be rather long as a result, because not only does Algiz have these powerful lessons for me, and by indirectness also you, it also has upright, converse, and reverse. So we're going to be sitting here for Algiz divination meaning for a while as well. Alright, so Algiz upright, the divination meaning. Algiz upright in divination, it means protection. It means, in general, that things are safe, that you are protected, that you have little to fear. Of course, as always, this should never be taken to mean that you can be complacent, because that is never something that the runes would advise you. That is not even the case in Isa. Isa even requires you that you just limit your activity, that you maybe continue planning, but we have discussed that. But complacency is not something that should be taken from those words. Advises us to remain wary of our lives, of our surroundings, of everything around us at all times, though. Algiz may also symbolize a divine connection, even divine favor. It may indicate that the balance between living your mundane and spiritual life is in harmony, at least in the matter inquired about. So, for example, if you are, inquiring about a specific area of your life, and Algiz appears in that context, that means that in that context, things are protected, things are going overall relatively, or I should say very smoothly. But obviously complacency should then not be the end result of this reading in your mind. So Algiz may symbolize a divine connection, divine favor. It may indicate that and by divine favor I mean that the deities you're working with, the spirits you're working with, they're looking at the things that you're doing with approval, with you know, with happiness, with joy. You're making your ancestors proud, stuff like that. You know, it may indicate that the balance between living your mundane and spiritual life is in harmony. Like I said, that it must be utilized in order to bring the situation to a satisfactory outcome or resolution. Since the rune represents divine connection, it should also always, regardless of what way it is facing, be a warning to us that we are ever to be cautious to never sway one way or another, too far at least, in terms of where our focus lays in life. We need to remain aware, obviously, that the physical is just as important as the mental and spiritual aspects of our existence. So what that means is that it is unhealthy for us to focus too much on the daily physical aspects of life. That is something that we see a lot, and I think I've discussed this way back when I first started the Futhark in one of those rooms. I think it may have been Fehu, from the top of my head. But it may very well be that you are so focused on making money that you forget to have recreation, mental stimulation, positive physical stimulation. If all you're doing is sitting in your office from 9 to 5 and you're just, typing stuff and, that sort of thing, it is mind-numbing. It is destroying your spirit slowly. And I get the need for money, I really do. But there are things that you just need to balance that with. On the other hand, those who are too far engaged in the spiritual without grounding themselves through, physical exercise or walking in nature or doing fun things with your wife and kids or whatever, stuff like that, or play some games, whatever. Do stuff for amusement right here, right now, in the physical plane. Ground yourself. Make sure that you're not off drifting somewhere 24/7. And that's a lesson that we will be getting in a little further later on. So, we see this in modern society. Everybody is so busy making money. Everybody is so busy, focusing on the spiritual. Religion is dying, which, in my opinion, is not necessarily a bad thing. However, spirituality is a invaluable tool, if you ask me. Spirituality is something that is very precious, and I'm assuming that if you are watching this video, that you are at least somewhat of a similar mindset. So, there is a place for using your brain. Basically, that is what Algiz is also showing us here. There is a place for mental stimulation, for learning, for physical stuff, for mental stuff, for spiritual stuff. So it could mean that if it is, for example, in the challenge slot, that Algiz could be saying to you, you need to balance your life out a little bit more. It is also in that sense fun to me that there are three branches on Algiz. We could say that one of them is the physical, one of them is the mental, and one of them is the spiritual. So, those are things that need to be kept in mind if they are within the context of the question, obviously. So Algiz teaches us that balance is an important factor in everything that we do. We cannot, strive for ascension. We cannot truly understand our own divinity if we do not first understand the necessity of a healthy balance between our physical selves, our mental selves, and our spiritual selves. And of course, there are times when our attention is swayed more to one direction, and another time when it is swayed more into the other. If you have several weeks off, you're on a holiday, there is obviously a time to just take a physical break and just do fun stuff, or there's a time to take a mental break there if you are usually engaged in studying or something like that. And you may use the time for a holiday to delve some more into magic to develop yourself in that sense, and that's perfectly fine too, you know. So, in that sense, Algiz, when it appears, it is not only a protective rune for our personal issues, for our mundane issues when we are under threat, because I do very strongly feel that Algiz is the most powerful protective rune, and yeah, so that is a another application of Algiz. That Algiz is signifying you are protected in case there is an issue that involves harm to you or perhaps to someone you are near and dear to. And in this case, Algiz can show that, no matter what the opposing party or parties might be trying, there is little that is going to be coming through, as long as, again, you do not become complacent. It is, therefore, because of all these aforementioned things, also a protection to our psyche, in that it counsels moderation and balance in all things. So an example of Algiz upright, even though I have already briefly given you guys one. Suppose that you are wanting to know how to develop your intuition and or magical abilities. Excuse me. You are focusing all your time on magical pursuits and you leave little time for mundane things such as practicing a sport, other kinds of physical exercise, even other recreation such as relaxing by, I don't know, playing a video game, by playing board games with your grandma, I don't know, by spending time with your family, by engaging in conversation with friends, etc. So Algiz could show up here in the challenge slot in order to indicate that in order for you to achieve your goal, you need to balance out your metaphysical pursuits with those that are a bit more mundane. The answer will come to you more easily and more naturally that way in how to develop your intuition, because that is something that, especially in the beginning, I myself had some problem with, because I was just constantly delving into magic and delving into spirituality and constantly wanting to know answers. And eventually, I like to think that Frey especially helped me to understand that, the physical aspect of life is very, very important. And I actually, just kind of went into engaging into physical exercise more, because it's quite funny how that worked for me. Because before I started working on the Futhark, I was very interested in physical exercise. I actually used to bodybuild, and you probably couldn't tell now, but I mean, I've slacked off for a good 2 years until quite recently. This is something, again, that we will be discussing a little further down the line. But I was very focused on the physical development of my body, right? And I would eat obsessively healthy, and I would eat, which is not necessarily a bad thing, considering all the junk food that's out there these days. But, you become very focused and very obsessed, and they say that physical exercise is addicting, and I have found this to be true. And it basically came to a point where all I did was just, go to the gym and stay there for hours a day for 5 days a week. And then in the weekends, I would pretty much just sit on my butt and, play video games. So eventually, when I started delving into magic, that part started fading away, and then I started becoming too focused on the spiritual. And I have finally found a proper balance between that. So that is something that I am going to be discussing with you. In the spiritual meaning of the Algiz rune when it is in its upright position. So Algiz is, as I think I have stated before, Algiz is, as I mentioned, my favorite rune in the Elder Futhark. And the reasons for this are many. It is because, to me, it represents the most important lessons of them all when one delves into the metaphysical. The lesson of balance in all things, while still maintaining that that ecstasy that comes from working with with the divine and spiritual energies that are around us on a constant basis. It shows us that even the mundane is divine, and since even the mundane is divine, it too needs to be honored. Um, you know, this may seem a little cringeworthy, but because I come from a Christian background, I a very strict Christian background, might I add. I always had some issues with sexual stuff, and eventually I started talking to Frey about this because Frey is representative of the masculine sexual energies, whereas Freya is the feminine representation of the sexual energies. And I was like, yeah, hey, can you help me out with this? And this was a while ago, and he's like, yeah, sure. And I kind of worked with him on that, and I basically eventually promised him, like, you know what, I have deprogrammed myself from all this Christian conditioning, and I basically told him in a deal that I basically cut with him, and I said, you know what? I'm going to promise you that from now on, every woman I'm with, even if it is just having sex with her, even though there is no, relationship involved, I'm going to enjoy every second of it. And he's like, great, perfect, and stuff like that. So I'm saying this because before I kind of strip my mind of this conditioning. I had this, on one hand, very strong aversion to sexual things, as many Christians do, who are coming from a very hardcore background. I am very well aware that not everybody who is Christian has reservations about these kinds of things. But on the other hand, I also had this almost obsessiveness with it, and that is the old story of Eve and the apple. When you're not allowed to have something, something becomes more appealing. So there is this constriction there that is unhealthy. It is unbalanced because our bodies obviously have sex drives. It obviously has a physical need, and eventually I started. Once I kind of started unraveling my mindset, I started becoming a bit of a sex addict. I mean, I lived in the Netherlands, which is where I'm from. Prostitution's legal there. I started going to, dominatrices. I started going to prostitutes, and I just basically wanted to have sex constantly. And eventually, I kind of started scratching my head, and I'm like, yeah, this can't be the right way to do it either. And eventually. With some outside help, I developed a healthy relationship with it, and eventually I just came to the point where I'm like, you know what, when it happens, wonderful. I will respect my body's desire to have these natural and healthy things, and at the same time, I'm not going to become so obsessed with it that it's going to be as toxic as that once was, and I will not feel guilty for having these desires on the other hand. And so slowly that balance came about, just like it came about with my physical versus mental versus spiritual, because nowadays I try to learn things about mundane things and mentally stimulate myself that way. I try to physically work out. I try to honor my physical impulses and drives and procreative instincts, shall we say. I try to honor my desire to delve into magic. I try to, honor my desire for connecting with the divine, for walking the path that I'm called to, because even though there is a balance in all these things, I do feel that that is where my goal in this life lays, and that is where I'm perfectly happy with. But I am also very well aware that the other two areas in life need to be honored in almost equal, if not equal, proportions. So that is another lesson that Algiz in a spiritual context teaches us that there needs to be a healthy balance, and that directly leads me into the connection to physical exercise that Algiz teaches us. Um, there is a tendency amongst those who are working in the metaphysical, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who has noticed this. I've seen several other people here on YouTube talk about that as well. Um, they have made very excellent points about that, where oftentimes those who engage in magic, they will become a little plump, shall we say, when they age, and that is just not the optimal condition for your vessel that you are inhabiting to be in. I mean, think of it. If everything is energy, our bodies, the way they are, is also energy. And do you want to stuff negative things inside this vessel, which helps you channel that energy? Do you want to neglect working out these muscles that you have, which in turn will help you work better with these energies? Because make no mistake, the third eye, intuition, and all those things connected to what we use in magic, in the metaphysical, they are, at the end of the day, just proverbial muscles. They are, well, maybe not even proverbial muscles. They may actually have physical components to them. So there is a very strong connection to keeping your body, your temple, to keeping it holy in that sense, by consecrating it, by doing nice things with it, by honoring its desires, by respecting that it needs to move, because it's obvious that when we don't use our physical bodies, we neglect our bodies, that there are several issues in the forms of diseases, stuff like that start occurring. For example, if we don't, move our necks and we sit behind the computer all day, we develop repetitive strain injury, which is something I dealt with for a while, and stuff like that. If we dishonor our bodies by not balancing these things out properly, it's going to cause all sorts of problems. And in that sense, Algiz, as a tree that is rising up to the sky, it also depicts that we plant our feet firmly into the earth before we can start reaching up. And I think that in the very shape that this rune takes, that the rune is teaching us this particular lesson as well. I mean, we see this to, be a little geeky about things, but in popular media, we see like these old, shriveled up guys with like massive beards and unkempt fingernails and these robes that are, way too big for them. And they have this massive spell book with them, and this is to represent this wizened old man who is a sage and who has done nothing but his life but just to dedicate it to magic, just so he can cast a couple fireballs, and you know what I mean. And then on the other hand, we have the stereotype of the I don't know, the guy in his late 20s, early 30s, who is this massive, beefy, bulky dude who swings two battle axes the size of his entire body, and that is then to represent the physical warrior. So I would say that there is this idea that in order to be good at magic, you have to just do nothing but magic, and in order for you to be good at physical stuff, you have to do nothing but physical stuff. And I would argue that both of those extremes are extremely misinformative. I would argue that they are extremely unhealthy, actually, because in my worldview, in my point of view, there is no better magician than he who honors his physical body, he who honors his physical needs, who does not end up becoming a 12-pound old guy who was basically just some skin with some bones underneath it, who just happens to have neglected pretty much everything except that spellbook he carries with him. So, you know, instead of being an emaciated, shriveled old man with unkempt hair and fingernails, I would urge you all to just lift weights, do other exercises to build your muscle mass, work on your endurance through cardio or other endurance sports, keep educating yourselves, continue taking up knowledge on both spiritual and mundane matters, because these things stimulate your brain as well. That fulfills another need. You know, in so doing, you become that spiritual warrior that you need to be in order to get the most out of your life. And this goes for women too, obviously. There is no need to limit yourself to just cardio because you are afraid you will become too muscular. 99% of the time, for most women, that's just not going to work that way. So, you know, this is kind of a spiritual lesson, which is perhaps not even so much about spirituality as it is about a balance between the spiritual, mental, and the physical. So we come to Algiz Converse, when what it means in divination. Converse Algiz has to do with deception, the way I interpret it. Usually of the self, in terms of how well protected you are in a given situation being inquired about. In other words, you may think that things are going more in your favor than they actually are. There are things working against you and you are being complacent and are doing nothing or not enough about it. Alternatively, it may mean that there are opportunities for you to grow and develop into your spiritual power, or, depending on the context of the question, it may truly be about growth and development regarding any area of your life being inquired about. So often this may be due to resistance to experiencing new experiences from your end, although if you are reading for others, or in order to interpret the feelings of other people, it may indicate, obviously, that they are the ones showing the resistance. So Algiz Converse is overall about trying to resist things that need to happen. And usually this resistance is happening out of fear, which leads us back to the general interpretation of Algiz as the rune that it is, outside of the context of necessarily divination, in its capacity as the rune of fear. And it represents the inquirer or those inquired for being afraid and not willing to face a situation, even though that situation will likely ultimately be to benefit of the individual in question. So an example of Algiz Converse. Suppose that someone has had nasty experiences with relationships for most of their life. They have someone interested in them that they feel attracted to, that would be good for them, but they have so much mistrust and feel such fear along the lines of, what if I get screwed over or cheated on again? They ask the runes on advice, and this rune may be showing up as the present or challenge rune in this context. So Algiz here then would be counseling to take the leap, to enter a relationship, to face those fears. You may find that your fears were unfounded and that the relationship will obviously therefore work out. So alternatively, Algiz Converse could here be counseling if the person doesn't want to admit to their distrust of the situation and or their unwillingness to take another partner at their side, to go ahead and face the fears, to sit with them, to work through them, meditate on them, introspect, and that way try to clear out those mental blockages so that they can become ready for a healthy relationship to unfold. Algiz in Converse, in my understanding in a spiritual context, would be that it is a message that tells us that in order to move past the thorny sedge branches of Algiz, those that cut and cause bleeding, that we must work on ourselves. We must empower and develop further until we are ready to achieve and acquire the energetic solar energies of Sowilo's victory, of its revelation, of the energies that are, awakened in us after we have overcome these fears, after we see that on the other side of the barrier that we are currently facing, that we are, you know, that we are finally past that we had the strength to make it all along, but that it was just all in our heads, that we couldn't do it, that we couldn't make it. So it tells us that we are right now, before we cross that barrier, that we are too afraid, that we need courage, that we need strength and willpower and wisdom in order for us to move to the conclusion of the second eight, because that right now in Algiz is our goal. We want to work through Algiz, we want to learn all we can from it, and then move on and receive that burst of energy, those revelations that will lead us into the last eight, that will give us many very positive lessons and tools to develop ourselves, to enrich our lives with. So basically, you have not so far heeded the lessons taught to you adequately. Even though you are on your way to doing so. So you are currently in the process, but you are kind of overestimating your capabilities, and perhaps even in certain contexts underestimating it. It may be saying either build your energy, it may be saying you already have the energy, but there's still some mental blockages that you need to overcome. But it also wants you to know that you are not judged for your actions or lack thereof. You are not seen as a coward, but you are merely given a warning that you need to develop yourself further, or that you need to develop yourself further mentally in order to mentally be ready to take the leap, because there is a difference there. If you have enough experience, enough knowledge acquired at this point, but you are scared to take the leap, to deprogram yourself of all that useless garbage that society has indoctrinated you with about your own limitations, about your own, about how crazy you are, that you are working with energy manipulation, which at the end of the day is what magic is. Unless you are, of course, bargaining with deities, or, but you get what I mean. But even then, you are still manipulating energy, because even then, you are still doing things to give something in order to receive something, because you're most likely never going to get anything for free, unless there is, no, you are just not going to get anything for free. So that is something that you have to work on if you want to interpret Algiz as a converse in its converse capacity. You are encouraged to continue on your path. That is something that you have to remember. It is not a sign of, oh, you failed, because the only failure that will ever be attained is when you choose to give up. And you are encouraged to show your true will, to manifest it in order to overcome what is set before you. It also, as the rune of fear, wants you to remember that courage and bravery are not the absence of fear, because fear is a natural survival mechanism that we as human beings, and the way we have evolved in our physical bodies, that we have. And it is a very useful tool. It can warn us against, getting ourselves killed needlessly, and that's a good thing. But it can also be a hindrance in moments where, you need to do something because either your life or that of someone else, or, your happiness or whatever depends on it. So it is when fear is holding you back from doing what needs to be done that it becomes a burden rather than a healthy survival mechanism. So let go of your inhibitions, to let go of fear, and know that if you choose to act, your efforts will be rewarded, which is namely with the understanding of Algiz, and consecutively with the energy that Sowilo has in store for us. On the flip side, Converse Algiz may counsel us that we are too overconfident, like I said, and that we could use some inhibiting of our actions. Not doing so could lead to negative and unwelcome consequences, in that we may be trying to cross the barrier because we are so confident that we actually can, while we can't at that point in time. In that case, in these two different cases, some meditation, some counseling is required to, find out exactly where we're standing. As everything in magic, it dictates introspection. It dictates the need to analyze our internal selves and not to become overconfident or too, too shaken in our faith in ourselves, or even the faith in those helping us, even the faith in those around us. All right. So, so Algiz reversed and what it means in divination. Algiz reverse is interesting in that it does not necessarily always have negative connotations, which is a lot of the times, though definitely not always, the case with a lot of other runes. As Algiz upright symbolizes, as I mentioned in the general description of what my interpretation of Algiz is in the beginning of this video, or well, way back in the video, because this was going to be quite a lengthy one from what I can tell. Algiz upright, it symbolizes the connection from Midgard, which is our world, or our realm, I should say, to the higher realms of the gods. And so Algiz reverse establishes a connection to the lower planes, Niflheim, Helheim, Jotunheim, the worlds of ice and mist, the dwelling places of the dead, and the seat of the goddess Hel, and the Jotun, the giants who represent the forces of chaos and disorder, as we have seen in, Furisas, for example, respectively. So we also already know that these forces are not negative in and of themselves, as you have hopefully come to the conclusion of, because they are just part of the natural cycle. There is no good-evil dichotomy like we see in Abrahamic, mythologies, for example. There is order, there is chaos, and there is up and there is down, and there is, all these different worlds with all these different beings who all, in their own way, contribute to creation and the consecutive ending thereof, so that something else may arise from it after it has been broken down and found wanting. Because that is the natural order, the natural evolution, the natural cycle of something. That is how evolution happens. It causes species that are not fit for survival to go extinct, and then something else that has evolved survives. So we must take care to not fall into that modern era trap of good versus evil. Giants are not evil, just like the Azagods or the Vanir are not necessarily quote unquote good in that Christian sense of the word. So, like Furisas, which can be a representation of needed chaos to break up a stagnant order, or of Mighty Thor and his hammer Mjolnir protecting the gods and mankind, so too can Algiz reversed be interpreted in differing ways. It can mean that at this time a connection to the chaotic energies is established and or required. So in this context, you are to go along with chaotic patterns. You are called on to adapt, and that this will bring about the desired change, which in a lot of cases I suppose people could interpret as a negative, because it now means that their world is being shaken and turned upside down. And this is honestly, when I was receiving these lessons for Algiz, with that contract, as I mentioned earlier in the video, kind of how it began. I was first taught Algiz in reverse, that chaotic energy, that feeling of, oh shit, what the hell is happening? And after that, it was only after that that I started to, turn Algiz upside down, because first it was like, okay, so this is looming over me, what am I going to do with it? Because I don't know anything about this. How is this my fault? It was like 500 years ago, I wasn't me. But then I eventually started facing that fear, and I started going like, hey, you know what, do I want to be free from this, or do I not want to be free from this? I did what I needed to do, which was the lesson of Converse, Algiz, and then eventually I achieved this victory. I succeeded in my divine quest, if you will. And in that sense, I will finally be able to move on to Sowilo, and that is kind of how you could interpret this. So, you're going to have to go along in these negative patterns, or these chaotic patterns. And when I say negative patterns in this context, I do not necessarily mean bad or evil. Again, just to reiterate that. So you are to go along with these changes. You are to go along with using this chaotic energy to your advantage. And remember the lessons of Perfra. We are not always capable due to outside influences. Everybody else has their own free will. Everybody else has their own agenda. And so while we cannot always control what everybody else does, we can control how we react to it. And it is that part of our divinity that we need to use to manipulate a situation so that it is advantageous to us. And that is a lesson that you can draw from this. So, in the alternative interpretation, this rune in reversed can signify that you are suffering a lack of protection, because Algiz is, as mentioned, also the rune of protection, a rune of protection, excuse me, and that you would do well to work on establishing that regarding the areas being inquired about. That is to say, establish or increase your protections in the given area that is being inquired about. If you are inquiring about your finances and their security, for example, that means that steps must be taken, whether mundane, mental, or spiritual, aka magical, to make sure that stuff in that area does not get undermined that way. Whether that is because you are now jobless, apply for jobs, cast spells to make sure that you get your, or to increase the likelihood that you get your job. If you are spending too much, if your spending patterns are not within your current financial capabilities, you need to make mental changes that basically inhibit how you spend your money. Stuff like that. So others may be trying to take advantage of you, of your resistance or your energy, and you are to take steps to guard yourself. That is another interpretation that we can find in Algiz reverse in divination. And this obviously may also be the case for when you are reading for someone else, which is hopefully obvious. So, Algiz reverse, an example thereof in divination. Suppose that you are feeling drained, and you do a reading on the nature of this feeling. Algiz shows up in reverse in the past slot of the reading. So this could indicate that too much energy has been drained from you. Maybe that you have given too much of it away. That you have given too much of your energy to helping others, but you have not taken adequate time to help yourself, to rest, to relax, to balance these things out in your life. And here we again see this balance, this balance meaning of Algiz, where we have to make sure that we are dividing our attention and energy appropriately, and not just pouring everything in one area and aspect of our lives. So there has been too much focus on that one area, or those few areas, and not enough on others, such as in this case, taking care of yourself, looking after yourself, making sure that you use tools to have recreation, amusement, to make yourself feel happy, to make yourself feel better. So your life could, in essence, use a little positive chaos in this context to shake things up, to get out of that drudge, to bring about a healthy balance in your life. And reversed Algiz is this indication to you in that sense. You are neglecting your balance, you are neglecting the protection, because if you keep giving too much away, that in and of itself is taking away your own protection on yourself. Because there needs to be a healthy balance between what we give to others and what we take for ourselves. So Algiz reversed the spiritual meaning in my interpretation, as always. Algiz reversed, it teaches us that sometimes we have to tap into energies that are chaotic and, as mentioned, sometimes they are unpleasant in order for us to reach our goals. Achieving your ascent is not just love and light, flowers, rainbows, and sunshine, as I have mentioned. And if you wish to attain your ascent, your divinity, you have, or to tap into it, as I prefer to refer to it as, you have to be aware that sometimes less than pleasant things need to happen in order to get where you want things to be, or where you want to be. Um, you know, or even the people around you, where the people around you need to be, or where you need to get those that work against you to be, because that is also a possibility. Algiz shows us that a balance is also necessary in light and dark, order and chaos. We must use all the energies available to us, even though we may have a preference for one of them. It also shows us that we must always be responsible in our actions, and that we take care on how to apply what energy, when, and why. You have to take care not to oppress others simply because our ego dictates we can and therefore should. Therefore, it also cautions against being a nasty person just for the sake of being a nasty person. So we are, as they say, our actions. And if we fail to heed that particular lesson, then we are just not ready for the responsibility that the next 8 will carry in itself, as well as in its applications in our lives and on every level of our existence. So then this rune also embodies the principles embodied by Odin, and it is clearly shown in Odin's rune, Ansus, which is the rune of wisdom. So knowing when to act and how to act, in what manner, at what time, and in what place, and with whom, while not working with someone or someone else, or something else. It is also it also means that we should not be afraid and fearful to make mistakes, because not even the gods are perfect. I mean, as I said in the beginning, I take the Eddas with a massive grain of salt, due to the circumstances in which they were written. I mean, the old Germanic tribes, they did not have written documents like we have with the Egyptians in the form of hieroglyphs and stuff like that. We have a bunch of carvings, and we have access to talking with the gods for those of us who are so inclined. But there are no written physical means to read about their beliefs and how they saw the world, as much as a lot of other pagan paths may have. So we do know, however, from those sagas that it is often said that the gods they make mistakes. And again, I don't just believe in the Germanic gods. I believe in every single deity. I believe Yahweh exists. I believe Zeus exists. I believe Shango exists. I believe Shangdi or Shangti from the Chinese pantheon, and everybody else. I believe every spirit is out there. I believe those supposed demon lords, who, according to you, who we may ask, may or may not be old pagan gods, that they exist. Stuff like that. So, and the general the general thing that we see in those mythologies is that basically the gods are just wiser, more mature versions, mostly, than how humans are. But oftentimes they actually have very human instincts. They have sex, they procreate, they make mistakes, they get angry, then regret that anger, etc., etc. So, and Odin is not perfect, I'm very well aware of that, but I love working with him because he has been a great mentor to me, he has been a great guide to me, and he has been good to me. And, it's like, he does things for me, I do things for him, and I do things for him, he does things for me, and that's how it should be. That is a gift that is what we have learned in the very first 8 already. Everything is a give and take, and that is what it should be. because Gabo taught us that when we give a gift, the other person technically now owes us something. And if they give us a gift, we are obligated, quote unquote, to give a gift back. So there are many, many more lessons, obviously, that we can draw from these runes. And yeah, it is through mistakes and the chaos that results from them that we learn and grow. It is from everything around us that can be used, whether it is mundane, whether it is divine. And as we have discussed, even the mundane is divine, and in some ways I would argue that the divine is mundane. Because as above, so below, as within, so without. And I very, very much believe that, and I also believe that goes the other way. So as below, so above, and as without, so within, because these things they're all connected. Everything is everything. So that is, these conclude my interpretations, my lessons that I have learned, and that I am hereby imparting on you through this video. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I am very, very much looking forward, after I had a couple of days of just relaxing, just chilling out, and just doing my own thing for a little bit, to, I don't know, maybe next week, to hopefully be able to put out a video on Sowilo for you guys. And I look very much forward to making that, and to find out what lessons I can learn on that one. So next week we will be discussing Sowilo, like I said, which is the rune of the sun. It is the rune of victory, of revelation, of energy. And it's a very solar rune. It is obviously the sun rune, so it's very, very solar energy, very, very powerful, very invigorating. And I look very much forward to working on that. So I hope to see you all next time on this Elder Futhark Rune Divination 101. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Hail.